my friends. Today I have a very special episode of Rick Henry's talk show for you. This episode is special because my guest this week is my friend Mike Patton. I have known Mike since the early part of 1979. He was an employee at the music store named Licorice Pizza in Orange, California. At that point in time, I was a regular customer in the store, and by 1981, I became an employee. There is a core group of us from Licorice Pizza that are still connected. We consider each other family. Hi, Mike. Greetings. It is so nice to have you here today. We've been friends for more than 40 years and have been to many common events, including Licorice Pizza reunions, crazy house parties, and Sandy Edwards' marriage to Steve Bowl in 1984.
Hey, Rick. Yeah, we've known each other for a long time. It seems like Licorice Pizza is kind of a hub of a lot of people that like to remember that time period. And don't forget, I was the best man at Steve and Sandy's wedding. So let's not forget that.
Oh yes, that's right. You were the best man. And if you recall, my roommate at the time, Joyce, caught Sandy's bouquet. Before moving on, I want to fill everybody in on Mike's background. From 1978 to 1982, and again 2011 to 2014, Mike was the bass player with the seminal hardcore punk rock band Middle Class. Mike has also played bass with the era-defining dark wave band Cathedral of Tears, and Eddie and the Subtitles. Throughout the 1980s, Mike collaborated with multiple bands, including the Minutemen, China White, the Adolescents, Trotsky, Ice Pick, and L7. Mike, so let's get this started. What first sparked your interest in music?
At my house growing up, my mom had promised a relative of hers that all of her kids were going to learn to play an instrument. That was a symbol of sophistication. So my brother played trumpet and tuba, my sister played violin, and I ended up playing the trombone. And as far as popular music goes, I really didn't listen to music. My dad was kind of a country guy. He listened to trucking songs and Sons of the Pioneers and Western music. And my mom listened to classical. They had a collection of Spike Jones, I remember, a bunch of singles, and we used to play around with that. That was pretty funny, but no real popular music that I listened to besides what was on the radio. Until I met Jeff Atta, and I think I was a junior in high school at that time, and Jeff was into popular music. He was into heavy metal, and he introduced me to everything. And this was just before punk rock. In fact, he used to read NME, New Music Express, and Melody Maker, and Cream Magazine. And I remember reading an article in Cream Magazine, a little paragraph about punk rock, and I just liked the names of the bands. They mentioned the Sex Pistols, the Buzzcocks, and the Damned. And at that time, when we were in high school, anytime you went someplace, people asked you what kind of music you listened to. So I would repeat those band names because they were shocking, and they set me apart from other people, and so that's how I got started with my interest in music.
Who were some of your earliest favorite musicians?
Well, as Jeff was opening my eyes with a lot of different bands, mostly heavy metal bands at first, and then and the glam. I remember Brian Eno was a big influence, and Roxy Music was a big influence. Iggy and the Stooges. Everything was tied to that period because prior to that, I wasn't really following music. So Brian Eno, Roxy Music, um, and the Ramones, of course, um, Stooges, New York Dolls, bands like that.
Yeah, Roxy Music. I used to love them also. As a matter of fact, I remember one time you and I were driving in my car. I forget where we were going, and I played some Roxy music. What attracted you to the bass? And do you play any other instruments?
Jeff had a friend, and we used to go hang out with him, and he lived in Delhi in Santa Ana, and so we would go hang out with him, and he had a younger brother who was uh, who had a couple of friends and was friends with Jeff's younger brother, and they had a little cover band that they were doing, and we used to listen to them rehearse occasionally, or we'd hear them in the background. One time they rehearsed, and we came in to watch, and they were playing songs that we knew, like the Rolling Stones and stuff like that. And so we sang along with the songs, and that was just amazing to me. It was the most fun that I had ever had, and so I wanted to do it again. And I talked to them. Now these guys were a lot younger than me, but I talked to them and I said, "Hey, I'd like to play with you guys." And they said, "Well, if you had a bass guitar, you could play the bass because we don't have a bass player." So I went and talked to my girlfriend and had her lend me money, and I actually bought a bass guitar and a little amplifier, and showed up and played once or twice with them, but they didn't want me to be in their band, and so that didn't last. And the ironic thing was that Mike Atta, Jeff's brother, wanted to be in that band, and he wanted to play guitar. And he had just spent money and bought this Flying V, Ibanez Flying V guitar, and he thought that was really awesome. But they didn't want three guitar players. They weren't going to be Blue Oyster Cult. They wanted two guitar players. They wanted him to play the bass. He didn't want to play the bass. So as I was hanging out with Jeff, and I was aware of what was going on, I talked to Mike and I said, "Well, why don't you and me play?" And so that's how we started playing. Jeff didn't have anything to do with it, but so I played the bass because that's what people said they needed in order for us to play. When Middle Class finally came together and Jeff joined the band, we were originally going to split the singing and bass playing duties, and I would sing half of the time and he would play bass, and back and forth. He had a Rickenbacker, I had a Fender bass, but Jeff was just terrible at the bass, and it was just not musical, really. I had played trombone all through school, so I understood bass counter melody and how to count and what was in tune. I understood all of that innately because while I was taking music, I didn't really learn what they were teaching me. I just faked it, which developed my ear really good, and that's really what rock and roll is all about: listening, being able to tell whether you're on beat and in tune. That's the most important thing. So that's how I ended up playing the bass, because in order for the band to go further, we just said, "Okay, Jeff, you sing and I'll play the bass." And that way we were able to progress as a band. Oh yeah, I play guitar. I can still make sounds out of my trombone, play the piano, but poorly, all of them. But I can play enough to play songs and write songs.
Let's talk about Middle Class. How and when did the band come together?
After Jeff and I graduated, we were spending a lot of time together, and we went to Santa Ana College, community college, and we were basically didn't have anything to do. At the same time, we were hanging out with Jeff's friend, and there we spent that afternoon singing songs that they were playing, and I bought the bass guitar, and they didn't want me to play, and so Mike Atta and I were going to play, and we were going to play punk rock because we didn't know how to play. So we started playing, and there was a drummer that we met. I don't know how we met him. He was in Huntington Beach. Eventually, we figured out a way to get rid of him, and Mike's younger brother Bruce started playing. Jeff was spending time with us, but wasn't going to be in the band. Always very coy. And then eventually, Jeff wanted to play too, and that's how the band came together. You could tell that I had very few friends because the rest of the band were all relatives of each other. And that's how Middle Class came together. We struggled in Orange County, and we had a rehearsal space in a self-storage area, and we used to get together 5 days a week and just play all day. And so we got really tight. And because we didn't know what we were doing, and we were not musicians per se, we took punk rock and we understood it at a very visceral, simple level. And we tried to reproduce that. And what we made up for, or what we lacked in technique, we made up for in energy. So we ended up not through intent, but just organically just playing the songs very tight. They were very simple, very tight, and very, very fast. And that's what we did. So we played songs that were a minute and a half. And we didn't know any better. We thought that was punk rock, and that was our version of it.
Tell me about your long-standing friendship with the Atta brothers, Jeff, Bruce, and the late Mike.
Jeff Atta, the eldest, and I were friends in high school. And then going over and hanging out with Jeff at their house, we'd go over and watch Bob Newhart, Mary Tyler Moore, and just spend a lot of time listening to records. And his brothers would come in and hang out with us too. So Mike Atta would hang around. He and I were the ones that started playing. And then Bruce would come around, and he got in playing the drums. And he was pretty talented. And so we all sort of developed together. And in a way, it was really good to be in a band with a bunch of brothers. It eliminated a lot of conflicts. And then later on, it became a bad thing because the family dynamic kicked in. And so for a while, it was really good. And then it turned out to be, unsustainable in the long term.
In 1979, Middle Class released its first EP named Out of Vogue and received local success in Orange and Los Angeles counties. Tell me about the recording process of the EP. The record was released on Joke Records and produced by Billy S. Starr. How did you get involved with Starr and Joke Records?
When Middle Class formed, there were I had three goals, and I wanted to play the whiskey, I wanted to get written up in Slash magazine, and I wanted to put out a single. So we were able to play the whiskey, and at that show, which was a lobotomy night, we got reviewed by Chris Desjardins in Slash magazine, and it was a great review. And the last goal, which we accomplished the first year we were playing, was releasing the single. So originally we were supposed to be on Danger House. They were the punk rock label. And so we were supposed to be on Danger House. And there was a guy named Billy Starr who was friends with those guys. And he was going to, they said, if Billy Starr paid for us to record, they would release the single. So he paid for us, and we actually went into Stevie Wonder's studio. So we went into this gigantic studio, set up in this little space in the middle of this cavernous hall, and in 2 hours we recorded the single. Didn't know what we were doing, and it was pretty amazing. and that's Out of Vogue. It turned out that there was somebody in Danger House that didn't think middle class was good, and it was the first time that there was I sensed an egalitarian nature to punk rock. Before that, to everything to me was we were all the same, a bunch of misfits. But that was the first hint that, well, no, there was an in crowd, and we weren't really part of that. Even though we were accepted when we kind of burst onto the scene almost immediately, we were still not part of the in crowd. So anyway, Danger House ended up not releasing the record, and so Billy Starr, who was very angry, released the record, and that's where Joke Label came out, because he thought that, from what I understand, that the Danger House guys had pulled a big joke on him, made him spend a bunch of money. So the record released on Joke Records, produced by Billy Starr. Well, that's the story.
One, two, three, four. We want to get up in a sense of there we go again. Throw my cheeks, fuck my body, get us out of Vogue. Out of Vogue. Tried to never direct the hate, it's just a bad book. Out of all the stories in a bad book. Getting started never ends. Out of Vogue. 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 Out of.
Many music critics consider the EP to be the first hardcore punk record. What are your feelings of owning this legacy?
You know, that's for other people to decide what came first. None of that stuff really matters. But the first people that started playing punk rock learned their instruments playing other types of music. So they were into glam, they were into rock and roll, whatever they were into, they knew how to play their instruments. And then this type of music came out, and they adapted to that. The Weirdos, all of those bands, I think, developed along those lines. With middle class, we didn't know how to play traditional rock songs at all, and so we took what the punks were putting out as what we were imitating, not the back catalog stuff that they knew, and then they turned into this, created this punk rock sound. We took the punk rock and we refined it, and we just reproduced that. So in a very primitive way, what we were picking up on was the message and the energy. And so that's what, I guess, hardcore was. It was taking punk rock and distilling it down to its essence, and then presenting it with just this raw emotional energy. And so I'm fine with owning that if we own it, and because it was distilling it down to its essence, and that's what was hardcore.
A second EP was released in 1980 called Scavenged Luxury. Tell me about that release.
The problem with hardcore is there's really not much to it, and after you've put out that amount of energy and that amount of feeling, then all of a sudden, what else is there to do? Music was changing, our tastes were changing, and we wanted to change too. So Scavenged Luxury was us learning to play our instruments, getting more syncopated and more complex in our sound. And so that was a natural evolution. Everything that middle class did was we were evolving as musicians and as players. Scavenged Luxury came out. We thought it was really good. Didn't do as well as Out of Vogue. We would be playing and people wanted to hear Out of Vogue. We started moving away from that. The scene started getting really violent. And with the HB scene and the skinheads taking over, and we were moving away from that. So instantly when we were getting very popular, we stopped playing the songs that people wanted to hear. And so we were never, our business plan was never very effective. We never really had one.
See, I lift its wings to see what it brings. Lie to myself, symptoms of the sea.
1982, Middle Class released its first and only album. Your sound evolved into a more complex and rhythmic post-punk sound. What were the factors that brought this new sound to life?
Homeland was continued the evolution. By that time, there were the big influences for us, or for me, and the band were Wire, Gang of Four, Joy Division, Echo and the Bunnymen. So music was getting more spacey, more pretty, more syncopated, more funky. And we tried to incorporate those influences kind of just naturally. I remember Jeff would say, let's do, would like a song more like Killing Joke or something like that. And we would try to do some attempt at that, but we really didn't know how. So all of the changes were legitimately organic as we were learning, and the songs that were influencing us were coming out directly in the music that we were creating.
Mike, I have been wondering for 38 years now, who is that on the album cover, and whose cat is that?
Well, it's my cat. The cat is O'Reilly, and Matt Simon is on the cover. And Jeff did all of our graphics, and there was a particular. And Jeff and I, before we were ever going to be musicians, we were going to be photographers, and we would go out and take photographs. In fact, the Out of Vogue cover was my picture. Jeff took this picture, and I remember he was taken by this out of focus picture of a guy through a window, and the window was wet. Jeff was trying to reproduce that with Matt, and all of a sudden O'Reilly crossed the window, and we all just loved that. So that's the story of the album cover.
What was the response from your fans and music critics when Homeland was released?
Homeland was the death of Middle Class. We released the album, and we were moving further and further away from our audience. And when that album released, we were not drawing very good crowds. And when we went on tour, the reviews basically were, they liked the music, they hated Jeff's vocals, and all the reviews were very critical about Jeff's form of vocals. And I never understood that, because I remember just listening to everything in the studio and just getting chills, and I didn't understand how people didn't get that. But they just hammered Jeff, and at the end of the tour, when we came back, Jeff was out of the band. The band fell apart, and that was the result of Homeland.
The song Listen was popular on college radio. What made this song stand out amongst the others?
I don't know why that song was picked out. I always liked The Call, but the album had, a number of syncopated songs. Listen was one of them. I'm not sure why that one people liked. I like all the songs on the album, so I have no idea why college radio liked that. I didn't even know that college radio played us.
Mike, you were involved with several projects outside of middle class. I am intrigued by your work with the Adolescents. You produced their 1981 debut album. How did you become involved with them? How was it working with them?
So when we started getting popular in LA, um, it was just me and the three brothers, basically. We didn't really know anybody in Orange County. Um, I was friends with Flipside, and the guys in Flipside wanted um, me to asked if I'd be interested in writing an article about what was going on in Orange County. And I said, I don't know anything. I don't know anybody in Orange County. And I said, sure. So he gave me some contacts, and I spent about a month, and I went down to HB. There was a scene in Huntington Beach, and met the crowd and China White and a couple other bands on the Huntington Beach scene, went to a couple parties, and then went to some parties in Fullerton, and that's where I met um, the guys that later became the Adolescents and Social Distortion and those guys. So I met them all doing that article, and the one band out of every band that I saw for that article, the band that I really liked was Agent Orange. And this was Agent Orange when Steve Soto was in the band. He left the band pretty soon afterwards, and the Adolescents got formed. During that time, Middle Class had played a show at Santa Ana College, and Eddie Joseph had shown up, and he approached me afterwards and wanted to go out. And the rest of the band had girlfriends at that time, so they weren't really hanging out with me too much. So here's this guy wanted to go to LA, and he was going to drive. So I went, great, let's go. And I started hanging out with Eddie. Eddie was older, and he had this band called the Subtitles, and he wanted me to see the Subtitles, and they were some weird new wave rockabilly kind of outfit. So I went to a rehearsal, and afterwards he asked me what I thought about them, and I said, well, they're just horrible as far as a punk rock band goes. They're dumb. And so he fired his band, and then asked me to help him out. So Bruce Atta and I played. He had shows. So we played a couple of shows. Bruce quit. Then we got Matt Simon. So that's how the Subtitles happened. During that time, and all Eddie wanted from me was an into the scene, which I had. And so I started playing in the Subtitles, and Eddie knew the Adolescents. He knew all those guys. He was a Fullerton guy. And so we started spending more and more time in Fullerton, and we'd rehearse at his place and the Adolescents. So Eddie became this manager, producer, and he built the Eddie Empire. And Subtitles were in the middle of it. He managed Middle Class, and he managed the Adolescents. During the time that he was managing the Adolescents, they were instantly big. They were obviously going to do something big. And they had a deal with Lisa Fancher of Frontier Records, and they were going to release an album. And I was going to produce it because I had produced that American Society single for the Subtitles, and it came out pretty good, and it was a good song. So I was going to produce the Adolescents. Well, during this time, Eddie was running out of money, and so we were out to lunch, and we were supposed to record. We'd known we'd gotten money from Frontier. We were going to record it. I was going to produce it. It was going to be this big deal, but we hadn't gone in the studio yet. And Eddie and I were out having dinner, and he was laughing that we were eating the Adolescents album, and I was like, "What?" Now, the Adolescents were kids, right? They were young. I was, probably 23, 24. Eddie was probably close to 30. And he was laughing about how he was spending the Adolescents' money on what he was not supposed to be spending it on us. And that was a major problem with me, because that wasn't what punk rock was all about. I liked these guys, and I was concerned that their chance was being squandered. So I let Lisa know that was going on, and all of a sudden Eddie was out of the picture, and Lisa took the band in with me as the producer into a studio up in Sun Valley, and we recorded the album, which ended up being pretty popular.
We are scientists in our lab, looking through the microscope. The little glass sides, they never lie. How can this small mind cope? I've never seen anything like it before. This amoeba's got a money.
You also produced China White's first EP called Danger Zone from 1981. I remember hearing you say at the time that you thought the band had a lot of potential. Tell me about this experience.
I don't have a lot of memory. The China White record went through pretty fast. I remember at that point, you like everything you're working on. And so I remember that Danger Zone album, liking it. But I was never a huge China White fan, never really hung out with them. I had a reputation because I had produced the Adolescents album, and that was really big. So that brought other bands to me to take care of. I don't really have a strong memory of the China White sessions.
Look out, 14 days, I couldn't go for more. In the terms of care, what I find on the floor. I'm only what I be. I'm only what you see. All lonely days on. All lonely days on.
So what's going on now? Do you have any new musical projects brewing?
Not currently. There's one thing that might happen, some conversations, but I've tried to reproduce the lightning in the bottle of Middle Class, where there were 4 equals freely being creative together and enjoying the experience. I've not been able to recreate that. There's always somebody that wants it to be just their way, or they have no ideas at all. It's very strange. So I would like to do another musical project, but it would have to be something that would be satisfying to me. I don't know if there's going to be another opportunity for me, but I would like to do it if I could.
Here we are, Mike. Time for a little fun. If you could be a member of any television sitcom family, tell me, which would it be?
Probably Mary Tyler Moore. That was what we watched, or Lou Grant. That circle. We used to watch that all the time, and they were all pretty funny. I like Rhoda, so I'm gonna really date myself and go way back to that.
Mike, I want to thank you for joining me today. Seriously, it's great knowing you, and I really look forward to seeing you at the next Licorice Pizza reunion. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to the next Licorice Pizza reunion as well. Thanks for talking to me, and good luck with your show.
just as a heads up, next week I will be interviewing the all-female quartet called Sounds of Devotion. They play and sing all their songs, and they are really great, excellent harmonies. And remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Rick Henry's Talk Show, so you can stay up to date on all the great new interviews I post. And remember to click on that little bell up there so you can get all the updates, okay? Anyway, thank you very much, and I will see you soon.
Ah.